about 2 hours later, my manager calls me. He's like, "Hey, man," and we just started talking about the event. And then he was like, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're going to the UFC." He threw that in there, and I was like, "What?" From what I know, is 245ers dropped off. They were gonna pair Grant and somebody else, and then he popped off, and then all of a sudden I slid right in. And it was like, it's one of those things. So, what are the thoughts? Is finally, I've been at this for a long time. It was one of those things. I was hyped. I had an adrenaline rush. I was like crazy, excited. I was, told my girlfriend, I was like, one of those things like finally, and she's like screaming, what? And I'm like screaming, it was just like one of those things. Like I was pretty pumped, but it was a satisfaction, but it was like one of those things I always knew was going to come, like it was an awesome feeling because I have so many fights, but I knew eventually that was gonna happen at some point in my life. Like we were gonna be there. So just so happens it has to be on 11, 12 days notice, which is whatever. I've been competing in MMA for 10 years. I was 12-2 as an amateur, and then now I am 24-10 as a pro. I turned pro in October of 2012. It's been a while. It's been a lot of up and downs. I've lost to some cats that I shouldn't have. But out of my 10 losses, probably 8 of those I was crushing the opponent and just got caught in something silly. So yeah, it was always like right on the edge of the UFC, and then I would lose to some dude that I never should have even, lost to, or I was whooping him for 2 rounds and then got caught, whatever. It's MMA, anything can happen, but I was always on the bottom end of that for whatever reason. So his style is pretty similar to mine. He's just got a different type of pressure. The way he takes people down is a little different than mine, but we got similar styles. So I feel, we're going to meet in the middle. We're going to throw down, and, it's going to be like a clinch kind of grappling match. Yeah, it's going to be a fun one, man. It's definitely a good stylistic matchup for me, I feel like, especially on short notice. So I like the matchup, man. It's one of those things. He's got super good cardio. With me taking on short notice, it's not like I haven't been in the gym. I've been training. I've been, so my cardio is there. So yeah, maybe that's their idea, but I feel like I love the matchup. I really do. I don't know if it was a favorite fight, but it was a favorite moment of mine at Express. I fought Austin Lyons in RFA like 13 or something, and I tell you what, I used to cut to 35. I had a rough weight cut. We went in, we weighed in. That night I woke up, I rehydrated, did everything that night. About it was like 1 a.m. I woke up puking. I puked for literally till about noon. Okay, and so I couldn't keep nothing out. I went and tried to get IVs. My body rejected the IVs. We went to the event. We drove the event. I got there, and all of a sudden it kind of stopped a little bit, and I was able to eat a breaded pretzel. I weighed the same as what I weighed in at, so I didn't hydrate at all. I was even probably more dehydrated, sick. They are gonna cancel the fight. I was the first fight on Access TV. They came up and they were like, "Hey, are you gonna fight? We need to know so we can move the swing bout on. If not, because they knew how sick I was." And I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight. Screw it. We're gonna fight." And it was in Lincoln. I warmed up, got my hands wrapped, warmed up for 1 minute, and I was dead ass tired. And I was like, "Oh no!" And so we walked out the cage. We started throwing down. We had a few scrambles, and then I remember Joe Ellenberger being like, he was in my corner, and he was like, "Hey man, we're 2.5 minutes in," and we just got up from a scramble, and I remember looking at him and like, "Oh shit, I'm tired," and so I just buckled down and threw down, and I ended up clipping him, dropping him, and swinging in for an arm bar, and ended up getting it, and we won. But yeah, it was one of the crazier moments of my fight career, as in like what has happened. So one thing this Express is, obviously is to MMA, young MMA fighters and stuff like that, is don't give up. You know what I mean? Like that's the one thing that my career is gonna show people, and when I start winning in the UFC, is don't give up on what your aspirations are, and don't let people tell you you can't do something. Because I tell you what, I've had a lot of negative energy in the last, like, ever since, you know, the loss of the Contender Series, lost here, lost there, but I never once gave up, you know, and that should show young fighters growing up, and even the vets, that shit can work, you know, just trust the process. And my social media wise is Instagram is actually Minner 135 from when I used to cut to 35, and then my Twitter is Darrick Minner, at Darrick Minner. So yeah, my man.